All right, go ahead and open your Bibles to Matthew chapter 2. And as I begin the message today, I have to tell you that the nativity scene right here in front of the church, in front of me, is wrong. It's wrong, and that certainly goes for the nativities that you have at home as well. The wise men were not there the night that Jesus was born, and they didn't visit Jesus in the stable. And there's very little evidence that there were only three of them, or exactly three of them, or whatever. We don't know. Well, having said that, of course, we know nativities are representative. In that sense, they're not wrong. I said they're wrong just to get your attention. Nativities are kind of like composite sketches, that they capture all the various details of the various times, the various people that came to visit Lord Jesus somewhere around the time he was born. And so in that sense, they are correct. But we know that the wise men didn't visit him until quite a bit later. And so because of that, they're a fitting illustration of what we do about a gift once it's been given. See, leading up to Christmas, all of us did a bunch of shopping, right? We selected gifts for friends and family. We carefully wrapped those gifts. We placed them under the tree, or we handed them to the person we were giving them to. And then what? Well, the intended recipient needs to do something with that gift. They need to open it. They need to use it. They need to say thank you for it. Something along those lines. Well, so along those lines, in the first 3 weeks of December, we have focused on the giving of the gift of grace. God planned it out. God prepared the gift for us. He presented it to the world in the person of Jesus Christ. Today, we're going to focus on the receiving side. Now that that gift has been presented, what do we do with it? So to answer that text, what we're going to do is we're going to look at to answer that question, we're going to look at our text today, Matthew chapter 2, the wise men. So let's go ahead and read the text, and then we'll go ahead and talk about it as well. Matthew chapter 2, starting in verse 1. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of King Herod, wise men from the east arrived in Jerusalem, saying, "Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we saw his star at its rising and have come to worship him." When King Herod heard this, he was deeply disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. So he assembled all the chief priests and scribes of the people and asked them where the Christ would be born. "In Bethlehem of Judea," they told him, "because this is what was written by the prophet. And you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, because out of you will come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel." Then Herod secretly summoned the wise men and asked them the exact time the star appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and search carefully for the child. When you find him, report back to me so that I too can go and worship him." After hearing the king, they went on their way, and there it was, the star they had seen at its rising. It led them until it came and stopped above the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overwhelmed with joy. Entering the house, they saw the child with Mary his mother, and falling to their knees, they worshipped him. Then they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts, gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And being warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their own country by another route. This is the word of the Lord. And we see in this the account from Matthew. He's the only one of the gospel writers to include this particular story. But he did because it helps convey the message that he was trying to get across in his gospel account. And in this story, we see that some people end up essentially with the gift of Jesus Christ, and some do not. And it's not who people would have expected. It was pagan astrologers who ended up receiving Christ, in a sense, not the religious rulers of Israel. But in this story, the wise men also set an example for us of what we need to do when Christ is presented to us. When God's gift of grace in Jesus is put before us, what do? Well, we see from them is that we need to recognize the gift, we need to receive the gift, and we need to respond appropriately to the gift. And then as we go through these 3 points as well, we'll come to know a little bit more about these mysterious men from the east who came to visit the newborn king in Bethlehem. So first, what we see that they do is that they recognize Jesus for the gift that he is. So the story begins in the setup in verse 1 with the time. Broadly speaking, it was during the time of King Herod, the days of King Herod. By the way, just a little tidbit, this shows us right off the bat that another thing we thought we knew about Jesus is wrong, that he wasn't born in the 0 year between the BC and the AD. We know from other extra-biblical sources that King Herod the Great died in about 4 BC. So Jesus had to have been born before that. So he was probably born sometime in late 5 or early 4 BC. And the mix-up happened because when people set up the calendars way back when, they miscalculated. So that's not really important for our message today, but a little bit of trivia for you. So it's in the days of Herod, and then the other time detail that he tells us is it was after Jesus was born. So right off we know that this didn't happen the day Jesus was born. The wise men weren't there the day he was born. And we also know that because it would have taken a pretty decent amount of time for them to travel from where they were. So anyway, you can just imagine the scene. They show up in Jerusalem and start asking around, where is this guy, where's this baby who's been born, the King of the Jews? And by the way, the grammar of how they say that, born King of the Jews, it makes it clear they're not asking about someone who was born to become the King of the Jews. It's not like, where's the royal baby that will become someday the king? It's who is born as the King of the Jews. The one who in his birth is already the King of the Jews. The grammar is very specific in saying that. That's who they're looking for. Understandably, that freaks King Herod out a little bit. But the point for the wise men is that they know that there's someone of great worth that they're looking for. That's who they have to find. And the question is, we ask, well, how did they know? How did they know they're looking for this King of the Jews? Well, we know they followed his star, the text says. They saw the star as rising. It must have risen sort of over Israel in some way. Now, what exactly was the star? Everybody has been trying to answer that question for 2,000 years. We don't really know. Various attempts have been made to tie it in with various astronomical phenomenon, whether it be a supernova or a planetary conjunction, or some people have even tied it to Halley's Comet, which came through in 11 BC, so that doesn't exactly line up. The problem is none of them really line up all that well. But they don't really have to, because it easily could have been God presenting a supernatural phenomenon that had the appearance of a star. We don't exactly know. Now, we also may wonder, how did they link this idea of this star rising with a king in Israel? Well, what we understand of it is that they were magi, or wise men. In other words, they weren't kings, despite what the song says. They were magi, who were astrologer priests in Babylon. They existed in other countries, but they were most known in Babylon. In fact, the word Chaldean, which is a Babylonian, came to be synonymous with astrologer priest type people of this same kind. So probably from there. And there were people who were interested in various things, like signs in the stars, dreams, other kind of quasi-magical type of happenings. And so they had probably made some sort of astrological calculation and connected it with some other historical writings that they had available to them of whatever kind and made this link. Now, one of the historical writings they probably looked at were the Jewish scriptures themselves. And in Numbers chapter 24, verse 17, it records the prophecy of another man of the east, a man named Balaam. And Balaam was hired by the king of Moab to curse the Israelites, but God would only let him bless them and prophesy truth about them. And he prophesied this, Numbers 24:17. He says, I see him, but not now. I perceive him, but not near. A star will come from Jacob, and a scepter will arise from Israel. This makes a connection between a star and a king in Israel. Another possible connection that could have helped the wise men make this understanding that there's a star and a king is the fact that Daniel was one of these wise men. Several centuries earlier, he was in the court of the Babylonian and Persian kings, and he could interpret dreams. He could tell the signs of things that were happening, and he actually became the leader of the wise men in Babylon and in Persia. And we don't know for sure, but it's not unlikely that he might have passed down certain records, certain written traditions through the generations of the wise men in Babylon, and this is something that these men would have had, perhaps, that would tell them of signs to look for and a person to expect. So we don't know exactly, but what I can tell you is that God's hand is evident through all of this, providentially guiding them through these things, whatever those signs were, to tell them that there is someone you need to go find. You need to go see who this person is. And the funny thing is, that's even though astrology was forbidden in the law of Moses, God graciously used even the practice of these pagan astrologers to guide them to Jesus. And so through all of this, they were brought to the recognition that Jesus is a gift, all by God's providence, using the signs in nature, that's the star, by using biblical and extra-biblical writings. And the interesting thing is, contrast that with Herod and the religious leaders of Jerusalem. When the Magi came to them in Jerusalem looking for more specific information, okay, the star got us to Israel, now where? And it's natural for them to come to Jerusalem because they're looking for a king, right? That's the capital city. This is where I would find the leaders of the nation. It's where I'd find royalty. I can ask the royal family. And of course, King Herod was upset about this. The word deeply disturbed, it's a very strong term of like just freaked out, basically, that this was happening. We know from history that he was extremely paranoid about challengers to his throne. He actually killed his favorite wife and two of his sons because he thought they were threats to his rule. But he doesn't let on to the wise men about his thoughts. He appears to be helping them find this new king. And notice that even between him, Herod, and the scribes and the priests, they're making a connection already between this star, King of Israel, and Messiah. They've now made that triple connection. And Herod gathers the people who would know about the Messiah, the priests and the scribes, and asks them, and they know right away where Messiah was supposed to be born. There wasn't any question in their minds. The prophet Micah said very clearly that Bethlehem would be the place where the Messiah would be born. And you might notice that Matthew is very specific about Bethlehem of Judea, because there was actually two Bethlehems. There was a Bethlehem in Galilee as well. That's why he specifies Bethlehem in Judea. So this is a very specific Bethlehem, the one in Judea, the one where David came from, David's hometown. And so they understood that Messiah would be born there, and that he would be of the line of David. And notice that the prophecy says he would shepherd the people. He would nurture them. He would treat them well, not tyrannically like Herod did. Of course, the priests wouldn't be able to kind of point that out to Herod because people didn't live very long when they criticized Herod. Besides, they got their positions because of Herod. Anyway, with all this information, they had a lot more information than even the wise men did, but they didn't see the baby as a gift. Herod saw the baby as a threat. He said he wanted to go worship him also, but we know from verse 13 that's not exactly what he had in mind. He wanted to kill him. He wanted to remove this potential challenger to his throne. So Herod saw Jesus as a threat. The Jewish religious leaders just didn't care. They didn't want to go see him. I mean, think about this. They were a religious elite. They knew their scriptures. They knew the prophecies. If anybody should have been eagerly anticipating the arrival of the Messiah, it would have been these guys. And then just think about their position. They're in Jerusalem. They know all these scriptures. They should have been anticipating Messiah. And these guys come from a far country and say, hey, we saw a star that said a king just was born in your country. What do you think should be happening with someone like these priests? You would think that they would be falling all over themselves. So let's run down there to Bethlehem and see if this is really the Messiah we've been waiting for. But no, they just send the wise men off and you go see if that's the one. It's like they don't care. They don't indicate any interest at all. It's probably because they're content with their situation. They have money. They have power. They have prestige. They don't think they need anything else. For them, the Messiah, even the potential of the Messiah from God, doesn't add any value to their lives. It isn't really worth investigating or considering. You know, this situation is pretty similar today, isn't it? I mean, in order to recognize the gift of Jesus Christ, we depend on God for providing us information, and He does that. He provides information just like the wise men. We can get information from nature, from non-biblical information. Nature tells us about God in general. It tells us God's power. It tells us about His rule over the nations. Our personal experience, our consciences tell us that there is a right and wrong. It tells us that we are often in the wrong. We know that we're accountable to God. We know that we don't meet His standard. So just from natural means, we know that we're in desperate need of the gift that God is giving. But God also provides us much more detailed information about His grace in the Bible. This is where the priests looked to see where Messiah would be born, to see what Messiah would be like. And from that prophecy, from all the different prophecies, we know what God's gift of grace is supposed to look like. We know where, we know when, we know how He's supposed to come. And the wise men took note of all the information. They did nothing, or the wise men took that information and they recognized God's gift. The priests did not. The priests and Herod had even more information and they ignored it, or they tried to use it for bad purposes because they didn't recognize the gift of Jesus Christ. Herod just fought against him, tried to get rid of him. Priests ignored him. The same two responses are common today. Many people are hostile to Jesus rather than recognizing Him as a gift. Just like Herod, they don't want any challenge to their idea of themselves as Lord of their own lives. Many others are apathetic about Jesus, especially those who have grown up in the church. Maybe they're like the priests in Jerusalem. They have all this information about Jesus, but they don't really care that much about it. They don't see Him as a gift. They don't see the value that He adds to their lives. So the question is, do you recognize the gift of Jesus Christ? Do you recognize the grace that God is giving you in Jesus? Sometimes we have eyes to see, but we don't see. So pray that God would help you see and to recognize His grace in Jesus Christ. And if you have friends or family who don't see the gift of Jesus Christ, pray that God would open their eyes so they can see Jesus for who He is, for the gift that He truly is. And once you see Jesus for who He is, there's no question that you will want to receive Him. And that's what the next step that we see the wise men taking. They recognize the value, the gift that Jesus Christ was, and they then received the gift. By receive the gift, I mean they used the information that they had available to them, and they acted on it. So the wise men recognized from the written records that they had, from the appearance of the star, that there was a person of great worth whom they need to go see. So they traveled from where they lived in the east all the way to Israel to get to Him. Now we don't know exactly where they lived in the east, but it would have been probably Babylon or Persia, which modern-day Iraq or Iran. And that journey from there would have taken months. In the book of Ezra, which we're going to get into in a few weeks, we'll start studying, Ezra reports that his trip from Babylon to Jerusalem took 4 months. And in the next verse, he indicates that it was by God's grace that it happened that fast. So it is a long and arduous journey from Babylon to Jerusalem. So it's no small thing for the wise men to make that journey. But since they recognized the value of the one they were looking for, they were willing to do whatever it took to go see Him. Just contrast that with the Jewish religious leaders in Jerusalem. They had all this information from the prophecies of Scripture, and Bethlehem is practically on their doorstep. It's only about 7 miles away. They could get there in less than a day just by walking. Even though it wasn't easy for them to go see this one who was born, they didn't care. But the wise men traveled over 4 months, probably, to get there. And it's kind of like that for us as well. Sometimes we have to do a little work to receive a gift we've been given. An illustration of that is there have been a few times in the past where Janet and I have made Christmas gifts for our sons into scavenger hunts. So then they open the gift under the tree, and they find nothing in it except a note. It says, "Nope, this isn't your gift. Go look in the linen cupboard," or something like that. And then they go to the linen cupboard, and then another wrapped gift or a gift bag or something, and inside that is another note. It says, "Nope, this isn't it either. Go look in the kitchen cabinet or wherever." And however many steps you want to do that. Of course, one year we might have overdone it a little bit as someone got a little annoyed after a few steps. But he kept going in the scavenger hunt. Why? Because there was something of value to find at the end. So he's willing to do whatever it took to get there. But some people get their gift handed to them right in their lap as they sit next to the Christmas tree, right? Not everybody gets the same amount of information, even about the gift of Jesus Christ. Some get it handed to them as they sit there next to the tree. Others have to go running all over the house to find it. But receiving the gift means acting on the information you have to get to the gift at the end of all of that. So some people grow up in a Christian home and basically have Jesus Christ, the truth of the gospel, handed to them in their lap. It's all right there. It's ready to open. Other people grow up very differently. They may never hear about God in their home as they grow up, or maybe they're in a different kind of religion. They may have to do a bunch of searching, a bunch of digging to find the truth about Jesus Christ. But in either case, receiving the gift means acting on the information that you have and what you know until you get to the gift himself. Until you know the full truth about Jesus Christ and the grace of God that is available in him. And then, whether you started out, with Bible stories read to you while you were in the crib, or whether you started out never hearing about Jesus Christ, whichever, once you find him and once you recognize him to be the gift that he is, taking hold of him means laying aside everything else of lesser worth. It's kind of like the parables that Jesus taught in Matthew 13. It says, "The kingdom of heaven is like treasure buried in a field that a man found and reburied. Then in his joy he goes and sells everything he has and buys that field. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant in search of fine pearls, and when he found one priceless pearl, he went and sold everything he had and bought it." And the common thread in both of those parables is the person found something of incredible worth and did whatever it took to get hold of that. And that is what we need to do. Now you may ask, well, wait a minute, I thought it was a gift. I thought you can't buy it, you can't earn it. These parables talk about someone, selling everything they have and buying it. Well, that is true, but you need to realize what kind of gift that Jesus is. Jesus isn't like, here's a new car to add to your already perfect life. He's not even like, here's free room and board to a homeless person. Jesus Christ is the gift of pardon to a criminal. I mean, here's an illustration. Imagine a king, a good and benevolent king. But in his kingdom, there's a band of rebellious bandits who are going around the countryside, burning and looting farms and terrorizing the citizens, looking for ways to overthrow the king. And say the king captures one of those rebels. By rights, that rebel should be executed on the spot. But instead, the king says to the rebel, "I will grant you mercy. I won't execute you. I will even foot the bill for all of the farms that you've burned, to repair them, to restore the livestock, to repair the homes." That's a gift. That's grace. That rebel doesn't deserve any of that. He couldn't buy that with any amount of money. He couldn't earn it. He couldn't be worthy of it. But there is something he must do to get it. He must give up being a rebel. To receive the gift, he has to give up his rebellion, and he has to swear full allegiance to the king. From that day forward, the gift of Jesus Christ is like that. He offers us forgiveness and redemption. It's a free gift. It can't be bought. It can't be earned. But it also can't be received without giving something up. It can't be received without giving up our hatred for God, without giving up our love for our own sin. See, we give up our old life in exchange for the gift of the new life in Jesus Christ. But that's like giving up a old ratty Matchbox car for someone to give you a new Ferrari. That's like giving up a toy house made out of a shoebox in order to get a mansion on the beach in La Jolla. There's no comparison. Even that's not quite enough of a difference. But see, once you recognize the value of the gift, you will do whatever it takes to get it. Of course you're going to hand over the broken, ratty toy to get the real thing. It's kind of like the merchant selling all he has in order to get that priceless pearl. It's kind of like wise men from the east traveling all that way to see the newborn king. So what we do now, the way that looks now in our lives, is that we repent. We turn away from our sin. We say, I'm not going to rebel against God anymore. I'm going to reject that rebellion and turn instead and receive Christ by putting my full faith and trust in Him, by giving my full allegiance to Him as King. And then, once you've recognized the gift who Jesus is, and you've received that gift, there's a necessary response. It's kind of like on Christmas morning. You've opened all the gifts, it's Christmas afternoon rather, for most people. You've opened all the gifts. There's all the mounds of wrapping paper all over the living room, whatever. Well, now it's time to play with those gifts, or to use them, or to read the owner's manual and learn more about it, to write the thank you notes, things like that. There's some time to do something with it. There's a response to Jesus as well, the gift that He is. And the response is necessary, but it's also natural once you understand who He is. We see a few responses from the wise men. The first one is in verse 10. When they saw the star, they were overwhelmed with joy. They rejoiced at seeing the star because it was guiding them to the one whom they'd been seeking. It meant they'd found this one after this long search. When you find Jesus, when you give Him your life and you receive His life in return, the natural and necessary response is overwhelming joy. Overwhelming joy. David recognized this in Psalm 16. He said, "You reveal the path of life to me. In your presence is abundant joy. At your right hand are eternal pleasures." The presence of Jesus Christ is overwhelming joy. Peter also spoke about this in his first letter. 1 Peter 1, verses 8 and 9. He says, "Though you have not seen Him, you love Him. Though not seeing Him now, you believe in Him, and you rejoice with inexpressible and glorious joy, because you are receiving the goal of your faith, the salvation of your souls." Jesus is our source of joy because He is the Savior of our souls. He is our connection to our Creator. He restores our relationship with the one who made us. And when you know Him, the joy is almost inexpressible. Because you found the one your heart longs for at the deepest level. You know, when we didn't have Jesus, we tried to fill that longing with everything else, right? With money, with stuff, with sex, with drugs, with work, with achievements, with so many other things. And none of those other things would ever satisfy. As St. Augustine said, our hearts are restless until they find their rest in Christ. Only He can fill that deepest longing, and that is why when we find Him, it is joy inexpressible. So the first and natural and necessary response to the gift of Jesus is overflowing joy. The second is worship. Verse 11, "Entering the house, they saw the child with Mary, His mother, and falling to their knees, they worshipped Him." You can see, by the way, another detail that this is some time after Jesus was born. It says they entered the house. They didn't enter a stable. Joseph and Mary were staying in Bethlehem for some time at this point. Actually, just to kind of round the picture out for you, remember they had family there, extended family, cousins, uncles, I don't know what all. And probably the plan when they came to Bethlehem was to stay with a family member, an extended family member. That's probably who they're staying, the house that is talking about here, is they are staying with a family member. And that was the plan. But other family was coming from wherever around to come for the census as well. And so the place that they were planning to stay was a guest room, not an inn. A guest room in a family member's home. They didn't really have inns in that day. They didn't have Motel 6. A little town like Bethlehem probably wouldn't have had an inn. So what we're talking about is a guest room. So most likely when Joseph and Mary got there, the guest room was already taken by another family member who got there before them. And so they had to stay in the stable, and the baby was born there. But now the other family members moved on, and they are still in Bethlehem, and now they got the guest room. That's probably what's going on, just to kind of round that picture out for you. But anyway, they're in this house. That's where the wise men visited them. And when they arrived, it says they knelt down before the baby Jesus. And the word worship here doesn't necessarily mean that they fully understood that this was God in the flesh, that this was the incarnation, this was the God-man. Because that term also could be used of just showing appropriate respect to royalty. But most people in that day, particularly the pagans actually, thought of an intrinsic connection between royalty and deity. And it's likely that in God's providence, he was causing these men to act in ways beyond even what they understood. Also, the details that Matthew includes seems to indicate that that is the case, that it's more than just typical bowing down before a king. When our English text says they fell to their knees, literally that means they prostrated themselves. This isn't just a little bow from the waist. This isn't just going down to one knee. This is on their faces before the baby Jesus. And when you remember that these wise men were highly respected people, almost nobility, this was an act of humility before someone who they thought of as superior to themselves. So worship is probably an appropriate term. They knew this one was a king. They knew that he at least had God's special favor. And then look at the gifts that they brought him. We sang about them earlier. In that culture, you brought gifts to someone who was of superior rank than you when you visited them. That was just what you did. That's what these wise men were doing. Gold was a gift appropriate for royalty, pretty typical. When the Queen of Sheba came to visit Solomon, she brought with her a bunch of gold to present to him as a gift. Frankincense was an aromatic resin that was used as a major ingredient in incense. And myrrh was derived from the sap of a tree, and it was used in perfumes. It was also used for embalming the dead. All of them were costly. All of them were considered appropriate gifts for royalty, for visiting a king. Now, from way back, the church has seen symbolism additionally in the gifts. We sang about it in the song earlier. That frankincense, since it was used to make incense, was a recognition of deity, that Jesus was actually in some way God or God connected to God. Myrrh, because it's used for embalming, as the story goes, recognizes Jesus' purpose that he would die for his people. Now, I think it's unlikely that the wise men were fully cognizant of that symbolism, but I think it's another case where God providentially caused these men to act beyond what they could fully understand and to put these things in there that has this kind of meaning. Also, this visit, this giving of gifts, fulfills the Isaiah passage that Benoit read earlier. Isaiah 60, verse 6 said, caravans of camels will cover your land. Young camels of Midian and Ephah, all of them will come from Sheba. They will carry gold and frankincense and proclaim the praises of the Lord. This is a fulfillment of exactly that. But what we need to take away from this, now that I've gone through kind of all those details, is that the appropriate response for us to the gift of Jesus Christ is worship. It's worship. If we truly recognize Jesus for who he is, that he is the Son of God, that he is God in human flesh, then it'll be natural that we should worship him. It's also necessary that we worship him because he is God. He is God with us. The disciples came to recognize that after walking around Galilee with him for 3 years. They worshiped him. Thomas said after the resurrection, "My Lord and my God." So like them, when we have received the gift of Christ, we must worship him With the angels in heaven, we cry out, Holy, 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 Lord God Almighty, who was and who is to come. And with the 24 elders in the throne room of heaven, we fall down before the one seated on the throne. And we cast our crowns before his feet. And we say with them, Our Lord and God, you are worthy to receive glory and honor and power because you have created all things, and by your will they exist and are created. When we realize Jesus for who he is, we must worship him. And then the third response we see from the wise men is obedience. Obedience. God warned them in a dream not to go back to Herod, and they did as he commanded. We also, when we have received Jesus, we realize that the gift we have received is a king. And that's, I don't know if you've noticed it, the other thread through all of these messages in December. It's the gift of grace, but that gift of grace is a king. So God's grace to us is a righteous and benevolent and loving king with whom we are now reconciled, with whom we now can have a close and loving relationship. But he is still our king, and so we must still obey him. The gift of Jesus is not a fluffy stuffed animal that you get to hug and just get comfort from whenever you need it, although he does provide us comfort. The gift of Jesus is not a genie in a bottle who fulfills all your wishes, although he does provide abundantly for us. Ultimately, he is our king. He was prophesied as the son of David, the heir to David's throne. He is the descendant of Abraham who would bless all the nations of the earth. He is the sign child who shows God's faithfulness to his promises. And he is the one whom even Gentile astrologers recognize to be born as King of the Jews. And so it is our gift that we get to know him. It is our gift that we get to serve him. If anyone here has not recognized before the gift of God in Jesus Christ, and if something I've said this morning is tugging on your heart, just ask you, do not ignore that. I want to help you see Christ for who he is. I want you to see the grace that is available in him. I want everyone to receive that gift today. You can do it right where you're sitting. If anybody's listening when we do the recording, just talk to him in your heart. Ask for forgiveness. And ask him to forgive you for your wrongdoing, for your rebellion against him. And then give your full allegiance to your king, and he will also be your Savior. And if anybody has questions about that, ask me afterwards. You need to dig, you need to search like the wise men did to make sure that you understand the truth of who Jesus Christ is. God honors honest seeking. And the one who seeks God will find him. The one who asks will be answered. The one who knocks on the door, it will be opened to him. And if you already have Christ, worship him with joy and obey him with your whole heart. And then, of course, one other response that we didn't talk about this morning because the wise men didn't do it, but the shepherds did in Luke chapter 2. Go and tell someone else about him. This is a gift that must be shared. This is a gift that should not be just held on to for yourself. It needs to be shared with everyone. Amen? Let's pray. Our Heavenly Father, what an amazing gift you have given us in Jesus Christ. Blows our mind how gracious you have been to us. We just thank you for this gift. We ask, Lord, that you would give us eyes to see, that we would have full recognition of the gift that Jesus Christ is. That we would worship him with joy and obey him with our whole hearts. Lord, we pray that through us, you would give us the privilege that the message might go out to many others who would receive him as a gift also and live their lives for him. Lord, we pray all of this for the glory of Jesus Christ in his matchless name. Amen.